Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week as we usually do with an album review where we go through an entire album track by track, exploring what each song is doing in isolation and it's part of the larger art. Today we're going to be diving into a band called The Tea Party. We're going to be looking specifically at the album Transmission, which came out in 1997. This album is 11 songs, just under 50 minutes in length. Most of these tracks are on the shorter side, with the longest song only being 5 minutes and 45 seconds. Let's dive into this and see what the Tea Party is bringing to us with the title track. Oh, this isn't the title track. Do we have a title track? We do. It's track 7. The opening track, Temptation. It's kind of dark. It's playing around some Middle Eastern sounds. There's a very sharp lute instrument here. It's random. There's that swirly white. This is gonna take a moment to acclimate to. I don't know. Really interesting collection of like rock and electronic and whatever that is. And this guitar riff reminds me of Stone Temple Pilots. Okay, I like that. Carve out the space, fill it back in. Yeah. Once inside, we conceive and believe in a God we can't feel. I can't feel it. I can't feel it. I can't feel. Destined by a fate so cruel, undrugged, true delight, laughing. Something about the melodic progressions to the way that the melody flows on top of the chord progression. That reminds me, at least in the verse and that bridge, of Godsmack. There's very nasally sound too. I'm gonna say late 90s, very early 2000s, stuff that's still coming off the cusp of that 90s, like alternative rock sounds mixed with a little bit of grunginess. I didn't even realize we were going into the next track. Usually I'm on that, but I'm so bewildered by this. What did I listen to? If we ignore the intro because it's kind of its own thing, it does set the framework for bringing in a couple of those more Middle Eastern chords. I don't even know if I would call them chord progressions. It's like a specific moment within the progression that kind of borrows from Middle Eastern harmonic writing. But it never like sits inside of that. It dances over there for a second and comes back into this grungy alt rock chords. So the intro, though, sets up this vibe so that when we come to it later on, it makes a little bit more sense, because I don't think I've ever heard this within this grungy framework before. And that's absolutely wild. Then the verse feels very Godsmacky. The chorus is very Stone Temple Pilots. The guitar riff in the instrumental, like once the rock band came in, before we got to the verse, it was this and it's like these two notes, kind of dirty, and just kind of bouncing back and forth between them in rhythmically interesting ways. It's such a Stone Temple Pilots thing right there. And I think in particularly, what is that song? Dead and Bloated? Is that what it's called? That parts of this track reminded me of. I think I'm in for a treat today. This is an interesting, more experimental, progressive side of that alt-rock grungy stuff going on in the 90s. And I think that, oh, you know, I feel stupid too. I wrapped up the reaction thought, I guess this would be about the end of the 90s, early 2000s. I already said it was 1997. I completely forgot about that. Like I said, dude, this song warped my brain. Yeah. I didn't know what to think. I forgot details that I already knew about. This does feel very 97 though. Which is interesting too, because Godsmack wouldn't have come around for a couple of years. And it's easy to trace a lot of Godsmack's inspirations through the 90s to kind of land where they crafted their sound, their particular form of hard rock. But I think Stone Temple Pilots would have been just a couple years before this, I think. They would have been contemporaries, that's for sure. I just don't know how contemporary, how closely Tea Party and STP were releasing stuff. So I don't know who influenced who, or if they both had similar influences from earlier in the decade. This is just wild though. All right. Some more objective things going on in here. Very riff based, but also very sonic based. It really depends on the section. For instance, the verse tends to be more sonically oriented. There's modulating filters going on the guitars. It can kind of just hold out one note, but it sounds like this one note is morphing and changing and evolving because the timbre of it is being altered. It becomes thinner and more higher pitched focus, more trebly focused, and just kind of blows out the low end and kind of widens out there and then shrinks back up. And it's just this constant evolving sound. It's just play a note, basically make a drone on the guitar and create movement through sound, through production, more so than composition. The vocals really take hold here as they're the only driving melodic part. But then we get to something like the chorus and the guitars are riff heavy. Granted, that riff is a collective of 4 different pitches, and most of the time we're only focusing on 2 of those pitches, but it's still a bit of a memorable riff there. The tone of the guitar doesn't really change much, but rhythmically it is changing. Pitch-wise, there is change, although it is more on the minute side. It's a riff, more so than sonic painting there. And so the track bounces back and forth between more atmospheric and textural writing, and more driving riff hard rock stuff going on. There's also, I don't know, I guess on the atmospheric side of things, there's electronic sounds in here too. I mean, we also have this acoustic guitar, a lute instrument. I don't know what it is. It has a very aggressive percussive tone to it. Maybe it is just an acoustic guitar with a specific type of strings. But I don't know that I've heard an acoustic guitar quite like that. Anyways, it's definitely in the lute family though, a guitar-like instrument. And that's typically playing these kind of brighter, faster moving ideas. We heard a lot of this in the intro. And while the electric distorted guitars are focusing more on this grungier chordal work, this acoustic instrument over here likes to dance into those Middle Eastern sounds. It brings an interesting color to the track where it's not so much that the song as a whole is bouncing between the rockier and more Middle Eastern ideas, but it's that different instruments are bringing parts to the track in varying ratios. Might have a little bit more hard rock, might have a little bit more of this Middle Eastern stuff, and it's just a different percentage between the two of them. It allows the song to evolve without actually having to work one idea into the other. You can still just write those cool riffs, and you can write this more Middle Eastern atmosphere. You don't have to worry about trying to figure out how to compositionally mold them. You're just going to stack the two layers on top of each other. But like I said, there's some electronic stuff in here too, right at the start, coming in out of the intro. I don't even remember what it was, because the rest of the song, it was like, this is weird, and that's interesting, and what's going on there? And I had to like keep shoving out old information because there's so much more to take in. But there was an electronic synthy thing going on at the beginning there, and that was kind of wild. And the drum beat that came at the beginning was kind of electronic-y too. Like, I think it was just a very reverbed, specifically produced acoustic drum set, but it just didn't feel like a rock drum kit the way that it was produced. And so there's so many little influences here, and for, I don't know, the first minute and a half, 2 minutes maybe, I had no idea what to expect. We had this instrumental acoustic stuff, and then we had this quasi-electronic stuff going on. I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe we're going to go in like a Nine Inch Nails direction. Then we bring in some grungy ideas, and then we move to like straight up hard rock. It never really felt like it wanted to sit still. And it always had these far-reaching ideas. What if we toss this in there? What if we toss that in there? I'm really curious to see what the album ends up sounding like. Based off of this track, I could see it going in two directions. We either expand the experimentation of this and continue to create more maybe rock-oriented music with influences from all over the place thrown into it and having a very diverse album, or this specific flavor of more eclectic rock music is what the album's going to be. We're just going to hear more of this combination of these multitudes of sounds here. I'm kind of excited to get into the rest of it, but I also see that this is not a popular album. This track has 6 million plays, track 3 has 2 million, and everything else is lucky to break 6 digits. So they have 2 incredibly popular tracks, and then the rest of the album is kind of unknown for Spotify numbers. It's not, they're not an indie band. They're not bedroom, underground, we're lucky to get 10 plays, but I mean, 145,000 plays on a 20-year-old album, that's not super popular. Although it also makes me wonder how popular it was in 97 before Spotify existed and people were actually buying CDs. So maybe, halfway through this, I'll go look at the Wikipedia and see how it did on billboards and record sales and stuff like that. Because that certainly can paint a very different picture than what a modern Spotify listening audience cares about musically. The structure to this track is fairly straightforward. Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. Not a lot of variation throughout that either, but what there is a variation of sound. Like I mentioned, each section kind of goes into its own direction, but it's all connected. And I think that's the part that really makes all this stand out, is that this could have been a song that was incredibly difficult to follow. Every section has a bit of its own flavor, but I think if we're kind of sticking with like flavors and foods, the base of all of them is all similar. It's the spices that have been changed. And so a lot of this ends up flowing together really well, even though from moment to moment, they're quite distinct. I think that helps a lot with the track, even with the intro being as unique as it is. We don't have anything else on here that is an instrumental acoustic solo moment. It still kind of works because it fits in with a flavor and instrumentation that is used prevalently throughout the album. Throughout the song. I don't know that I have much else to say about this other than it is driving. It really got me to start grooving at the end of it. And it's an interesting combination of ideas. Like I mentioned, at the foundation of this is a pretty straightforward track. It's experimental in more sonic ideas than compositional ones. I'm kind of curious where they go on the rest of this. Let me take a moment to read some lyrics and then we will press on. And here we have a song about having poor impulse control. Literally, the chorus states, "Temptation, it never lets me down. Temptation, I have one foot in the ground. You satisfy my soul and I've lost all control." The first verse is about temptation of lust. It says, "Driven by desire, shaking as her sex takes hold, I've lost all control." The second verse, though, is temptation of anger. "Drowning in rage, helpless, it steals my soul and I've lost all control." It's pretty straightforward about what this song is about. The bridge states, "Destined by fate so cruel, I'm drugged to delight. Laughing as these lies unfold, I've lost all control." I like that line about the lies unfolding. It makes me wonder if there isn't an element of self-reflection in this. As, yeah, dude, I have bad impulse control, 100%. If I'm tempted to do something, I'm probably gonna do it. I let the emotions go. But also understands that they have more control in their life than they give themselves credit for. But it's just one line. I don't know if I'm gonna bank an entire conversation around that. But it is something I feel right there. A little moment of clarity of mind. Pairing that back to the song, I don't know, it's got a lot of drive and momentum to it. I don't know if there's anything in there that particularly feels like loss of control, though, or temptation. So let's push on. This next one is called Army Ants. It's one of the lesser listened to tracks. Let's dive in. Not a big fan of this texture. Really big guitar sounds on the outside with the compression on the vocals. sprinkling of some early Nine Inch Nails in here. The guitar playing what the vocals are singing. So that guitar riff we had coming into this is an octave higher than what the guitar riff is right here on the left side. Interesting. Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, bridge. Let's bring it in some of that Phrygian mode. Faint crackling over here. Is this a bridge then, or is it the chorus? Because I thought the loud Nine Inch Nails-y part was the chorus. Oh. It's a nice abrupt ending there. Okay, less exploratory than the first track. This one is very straightforward, actually, in everything but structure. Well, okay, let me put it this way. The structure is straightforward. Just after listening to it once, I can anticipate the entirety of this song. It ventures a little bit outside of the typical verse, chorus idea, but I think my biggest question then is what constitutes the chorus of this if there's two sections that we visit 3 times identically, and both of them are fairly catchy. Can a song have 2 choruses? I've never had to think about that before. I suppose one might be seen as a refrain, but it means we take a while to get to the chorus proper, which is interesting in and of itself. It does provide a bit of release too, because generally speaking, the verse is rather driving. It's good intensity and momentum about it. The heavy section is tense and it's just screaming at me with a lot of compression and narrowing down of sounds, carving off the intricacies of the sound waves themselves and removing some of that unique characteristic in order to create something more abrasive and blunt. And we do those back and forth, driving to abrasive and blunt, driving to abrasive and blunt. And then we go to what I thought was the bridge, which is getting up on the bell of the ride cymbal, kind of bringing this brightness to the track. And the vocals kind of bringing the positivity out a little bit in the melody and the production of it, the sound sphere kind of opening up a little bit. And I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a joyful, happy moment of the song, but it definitely feels way less tense than the other two, where one is a bit more manic and one is very aggressive. This kind of relaxes on both fronts. For a chorus to be the moment that we kind of open up and relax a little bit, I like that. And from that perspective, if we go in this direction of there's two choruses, one is heavy and aggressive and the other is lighter and open, we have more of the heavier one towards the beginning of the track. And as we cross the halfway point, we kind of trade that out for more of this this brighter and open one. And I think that's kind of cool too. Again, they probably aren't both choruses, but we are getting some of that more intense stuff out of the way to bring in something that's a bit lighter. And we're doing it within the typical structure of mainstream songwriting. So I really like it from that perspective. And I think after I listen to it another time and I'm not trying to analyze it, I can just vibe with it. I think I'd really enjoy the way that this song is structured, primarily from the emotional, the tense and release element of it. Now, right from the start, though, I had mentioned this is texture writing right here. There is a little bit of movement in that, but again, it's just choose two notes and go back and forth. This is a lot like the guitar riffs we saw on track 1. But it does create this feel, this tension, this buildup right here, just the back and forth on sort of that saw blade, razor thin guitar tone. The drums are driving. We got eighth note cymbal work with this bass kick and snare, copying that same rhythmic structure of the guitar. Da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da. Captures that same rhythmic idea, focuses entirely on bass kicks, but the last hit of each group is a snare strike, and that's going to give us our backbeat cadence. This is very different from the more traditional use of the bass kick and the snare in more, I guess we would call them straightforward metronomic styles that we see in the chorus. It's really about timekeeping there rather than lining up with this rhythmic idea, the rest of the instrumentation. We frequently have two guitars. One's doing chords, I guess it's the right side doing chords usually, but very wall of sound. To me, I get more of the texture, the grit, the compression of this guitar than the chords themselves. And then we have the riff, the one that goes, da 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 da, that thing over here. Occasionally, we do get a center guitar. It's a bit quieter. This shows up primarily in the verses, and it's there to line up with what the vocals are doing to get us this cool texture layering, but they're not always perfectly in line temporally. The vocalist likes to drag out and hold on to some of the syllables for artistic effect. So the two instruments get out of line a little bit, out of sync with each other. I think that creates a cool little movement to it. It almost feels like the vocalist is slipping out of time and slowing down against, this really rigid version of the melody. And to me, that separation is narrative writing to me. I wouldn't be surprised if the lyrics are about not being able to keep up with something or feeling distant from something else or, whatever, feeling outside of the norm, just in a way feeling unique against a pool of something that's all similar. Something a bit more rigid there. And it is called Army Ants too. Both the idea of army and ants are both about rigidity and order. So the vocalist having a bit of looseness to their delivery and lining that up against a very strict temporal delivery of that same melody on the guitar. Yeah, I can already start to see some of this narrative forming together, and I hope the lyrics line up with that. The drums, once again, I don't have a big thing to say on this, so I'm not going to make like a timestamp for it, but the drums also don't feel like rock drums to me. There's something about them that come across as slightly electronic in timbre. I don't know what it is. I think that I would expect this guitar, or in this drum tone and production to be more at home in, I don't know, Massive Attack. Maybe this is like a drier, less reverbed version of the type of drums I expect in that. Or again, kind of bringing up Nine Inch Nails. So it's interesting. If anyone has insight into that, if you can place this drum production anywhere, let me know, because it sounds familiar to me, but grungy stuff is not where I expected. It's almost too high fidelity for the grittiness of everything else that's happening here. And kind of bringing up the grittiness, this track ramped it up. We had a little bit of these compressed vocals in the first track, but I don't really think that they were present enough for them to really make an impression on me. But here, 100%, I'm getting some Deftones. I'm getting some Nine Inch Nails in these really heavy moments. And I find that to be interesting because, to me, I don't associate Nine Inch Nails with grunge. It's another interesting piece socketed into this core grungy alt rock sound. So I'm kind of curious where they continue this. Like I said, I found this song to be a little less developed, a little less progressive than the first one. The structure is interesting, but the individual components are more straightforward. But they're still kind of bringing in these interesting sounds to pair with it. We did have a Phrygian idea in the bridge too, which I thought was pretty cool. A little bit of a harmonic switch up there. But I don't know that I have much else to say about this one. Let's hit some lyrics. Well, there is a little bit of a counterculture element in here. Mentions that people crawl on their hands and knees. They're blind from the vision. Mentions that we should bring on the brave new world, one of condition, slaves to submission. Now, the first verse kind of throws me off a little. It says, bring on the absolute. A walk on the water will lead you to slaughter. I'm not too sure what this is supposed to mean. Now, walking on water immediately makes me think of Jesus, the story of him walking on water, and religion is full of absolutes. How any of this leads one to slaughter? Well, actually, I guess this is interesting. Is it leading the person to be slaughtered or leading the person to slaughter others? It will lead you to slaughter. And I think that's interesting. Maybe it's not as vague as I'm reading it, but I'm trying to get some sort of meaning out of it. But I wonder if this is supposed to say that if you follow the lines of Christianity, you're going to eventually commit violence or perpetuate violence, at least, which Christian it's a religion that has a strong history of violence. So maybe, but that also requires that I read that final line in a specific light. Though also, Jesus walked on water, and him performing miracles is kind of what led to his crucifixion as well in the Christian lore. So maybe that's what it's saying too. If you stand out too much, you'll eventually be cut down. Not really poking anything particularly at religion, but using it as a metaphor for standing out against the crowds, which I think makes verse 2 and 3 more poignant. They say, hey, you should be standing out against all of this, even if it means putting yourself in harm's way, because it's better than being blind to everything that's going on around you. As the heavier chorus states, no one will feel you, no one will hear you. When you're lost in the crowd, you're just a number. No one can actually connect with you if you don't have a personality of your own. That's my read on it, though. I'm not entirely confident in it, but at least I can tie a thread between it all and support it. And that makes me feel pretty good about it, especially given how vague some of the lyrics can be. All right. I guess that's going to take us to track 3 here, one of the longer ones, coming in over 5 minutes in length. This one is called Psychopomp. Let's kick it. It's interesting too, all 3 of these tracks have started off with a sound that they do not explore throughout the track. This is very industrial. I'm expecting the song to move into that alternative rock sound, though. Please tune that guitar.
This, so sad to see the sweet decay.
This is almost theatric.
Of ecstasy. And you want it all. And you want it all. A frozen sun would
Why are the strings selling me James Bond here?
as shadows hide the deep despair. And you want it all.
Really interesting melody there.
And you want it
This one. Oh, of course we're going to change here on the last repetition. Okay, big bass. Strings. We have the toy piano throughout the verses. This is more of a ballad here.
You fade away.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So sleep tonight.
What a fun little idea there.
In idle dreams.
Really nice layering and pocketing too. There's so much space in much of the ideas that you can just put something in the middle of that space and fill it in, and it feels like it all sockets perfectly. Is this tune note? Yeah, more ornamental ideas. I thought this was gonna be a big melody. Nice expanded version of this section, which you've heard twice before now, so. A 3-note riff over here. Yeah. Giving us the chorus, but with the piano part from the verse. Love that. Absolutely. Y'all know I'm not a big fan of fade outs, but I think that's a place where it would have benefited. I mean, it's literally talking about as you fade away. And the song didn't change. Maybe it could have risen. I would have liked if the vocal delivery had changed. We did have a little bit more of a forceful, couple notes higher version on that final line, but I think just having more fluctuation in there would have worked for me. Because we're talking about a fifth of the song just repeating over and over and over. So I would have liked a little bit of variation there, but I think it's fine as it is. I definitely like the repetition as a way of solidifying the intensity of it. Repeating for emphasis is what's going on there, and I think that generally works. I just think sonically I would have liked some variation. And a fade out, I guess the fade out would have been anticlimactic too. I like the idea of the fading away, just the song fading away, but it also being the cyclical feeling that our protagonist has about this other person. But I could see how the rising energy is definitely the way to end this. So I like that. Maybe just a little bit more contrast, even if it's just the vocal line there, I think would have been cool. Anyways, though, I'm sold on this. It's nice to have a ballad so early in the album. And once again, I love the little variations to this. There's still an alternative rock idea. I mean, we have the cliche 3 rising notes, and then you just repeat them over and over. But of course, it's 3, and we're working in 4/4, so you're gonna have to change it up a little bit rhythmically to fit into that. So you have like do 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 do, and you kind of have to make this awkward 4 thing at the end where you hit low middle before you can do the low middle high again. That is such a 90s style guitar riff idea, and I loved hearing it in here, man. I actually have this thing. Okay, so I'm gonna a little side tangent here real quick. How do bands do this? You take like the tropiest, most cliche thing, and you make it work. Like, I've written some tracks and I use this 3-note idea, whether it's rising or falling, and I wrap it up at the end with the low middle, or high middle if I'm descending, so that we can fit it into 4/4, and it's like, it's an iconic riff style. And I'm using like the alt rock notes and chords, so it's got all that grit. And as I'm playing it, I'm like, this is boring. This has been done so many times. And then I hear it in a band and I praise it because it works, right? I mean, there's a reason it's overused. It's become tropey or cookie cutters because it works. It wouldn't have been overused if it failed. And so, like, how do bands do it and make it? Is it just because I'm too close to my own works? Am I just harsh on myself? Or are these bands doing something else that makes it work? I don't know. This isn't just alternative rock. Every genre has their riff tropes. And I don't know, some bands feel like they can make it work, and other bands it just feels kind of boring and redundant. It's been done before, man. Why am I listening to this? But then I hear this and yeah, dude, it's good. I don't know. I'm curious. Anybody who creates art, how do you get away from that feeling of, oh, this has been done before, this doesn't sound good? Because I don't get it. But yeah, okay, back to what I was talking about. We got this cool alt rock riff here, but aside from that, we have a lot of bass presence on this track. In fact, the opening of the track is very bass led. Drums are rather reserved on this track. And we also have a lot of violins and toy piano. I don't know if it is a toy piano or if it's just a very bright, clunky piano. I'm going to keep calling it a toy piano though, because that's the timbre it feels like to me. But I love all the instrumentation in this one. And it's pretty cool that 3 tracks in, I think we've had 3 songs with a semi-unique group of instruments. 80% of them, it's the rock band. The guitars sound the same. The bass, for the most part, sounds the same. The vocals, the drums, this is constant. But the supporting instruments the acoustic guitar on track 1, the more electronic parts on track 2, and the super distorted guitar for the heavy section in track 2, and now the piano and the violin. It's very cool that 3 songs in, we have 3 distinct groups of supporting instruments. I'm a big fan of that. I hope it continues on. I know not every track can have a unique set of instruments and still sound like it fits in the album. As you add more instruments, becomes more work, but what I'm saying here is I expect to hear more violins and more aggressive guitars and maybe even a piano again. And I'm not going to be upset about that as long as the album continues to feel diverse and dynamic. But I'm enjoying that part of it. Everything feels consistent. All of these songs feel like they fit together, but I'm not getting them confused, which is something that can happen with bands who kind of just do one style of music, like the Tea Party's kind of doing here. They're just doing it in creative ways. Now, this song also introduces something that stands out quite a bit from everything else, and it isn't the fact that it's a ballad, although that does stand out. It's the use of dissonance. Right from the start, we had a guitar, and the first thing I said was, dude, please tune that. I don't remember if I said the guitar or tune the string, but it was one specific note that just felt out of whack with everything else. And part of it is that there was purposeful intention or purposeful tension in the intonation. That's where I got intention, intonation, tension. Anyways, is that it's perfect. I need to think for a moment. It is purposefully a tense chord. It is purposefully unstable. But the thing is that I think the string is also tuned wrong as well. And it just increases the instability of it. It increases the tension and the dissonance of that chord. And it's just really tense. But it's also kind of eerie and moody. And then we bring in that piano, and that definitely has a little bit of a eeriness to it as well, but it's also playing notes that are creating unstable chords. So we have more intonation elements from that too. In fact, it really isn't until the violins come in and we kind of come to this, big rock ballad chorus where everything starts to line up a bit more consonant as far as the harmony is. And this is where the song starts to solidify harmonically before we venture back into a verse that kind of explores looser harmonic elements. And I think that this works really well because it creates an eeriness and a tension and then wraps itself in melancholy to hide away from the anxiety of it. And I like that storytelling element. It was unsettling to begin with, but I adapted as I began to see what the story was that the track was telling. And I think that the general growth of this track works really well too, because it isn't just about this contrast, this dynamic between two atmospheres, but it's also about a rising intensity overall. We start the song off really small. We add a couple of layers, we build up into a verse or into a chorus, pretty big moment. We pull things down again, but not all the way. We start the verse off about where we had left off, a little bit beneath it. We add in a few layers that are missing, and then we add some new layers in. And the verse 2 actually has new ideas in it that verse 1 didn't. This helps us continue to build the track up. And it creates this roller coaster where each rise or each fall leads to a higher rise than the last one. And this allows the song to, despite having this dynamic fluctuation, also have linear growth upwards. And it allows the end of the song to be that emotional peak, that climax that it is. It's really well paced with great dynamic writing, and it's done through theme and variation, presenting a verse and then presenting a variation on it, presenting a chorus and then presenting a variation on it. And by the end of the track, we've taken the chorus and injected verse ideas into it to create this full final idea. And I had mentioned that I really love this. If you've listened to my music, this is something that I love to do, is to create a unique, not a unique, but a memorable element in one section of the song, and then later on inject it into another section of the song to make things feel complete, usually at an emotional peak to the track, at its heaviest or most layered or most intense or most emotional moment. Is to kind of bring this back and be like, oh yeah, remember the ideas, the lyrics, the themes from this other section in the track, pair that with what you're feeling now. And it's about compounding ideas and getting the most out of the work you've put in. And they did a phenomenal job with that here. Absolutely love that. And that little piano part coming in at the end, 97 might have been different. I think we had digital workstations in 97, but the end result here for modern day composers is it's a simple copy paste. You just grab something you wrote or recorded earlier, paste it there at the end, call it a day. It requires a little bit more thought to make sure you have the room for it there and that it matches harmonically and all that jazz, but it's a really simple idea, and I wish more artists or even producers in the pop realm use this simple trick to really elevate work. It is, one of the things I always talk about is work smarter, not harder. There's a lot of ways to elevate work or elevate your artistic work without actually putting in a lot more work to it. It's all about thinking about ideas and planning them out. And this is one of them. And, and I love it. Let me hit some lyrics on this one. And this is a song about, well, it seems our narrator wanted something more out of this relationship and the other person didn't. It kicks off with the first stanza, you wanted this. It's so sad to see the sweet decay of ecstasy. Things were good. And you wanted this decay to happen. It says a frozen sun would guide you there as shadows hide their deep despair. So we have frozen, ice, we have solitude, we have shadows, we have despair, lots of negativity that is directing this other person's actions. The chorus says, I'll give you something more and you'll fade away. One last kiss before you fade away. So, again, our protagonist says, or a narrator, I should put it that way, says that I'd give you more than what you wanted, but because of that, you would fade away, you would leave. The relationship would end because I wanted to give you something more than what you wanted. I don't really know how to feel about this one. As usual, when it comes to songs like this, that's very much, at least to me, paints the narrator as the one who has the answers. Their point of view is the most accurate. It paints the other one in a negative light. The relationship was destroyed because all you wanted was despair and darkness and frozen worlds and decay. Is that really how it went down? In my experience, no. Getting one side of a story is rarely the full story in itself. But that is what this song is about. It's the end of a relationship. And the melancholic vibes and the general ballad feels of the song match the end of a relationship pretty well. There also is the dissonant components of this, which could just create the idea of tension and clashing. As we see, there's a clashing of ideals here, what the narrator wants and what the other person wants out of this relationship, and they're not working together. They're not seeing eye to eye, and I think bringing in the tension and unstable chords in this song does a great job of musically showcasing that side of the lyrical story. And that's going to take us into our shortest track on the album, not even 3 minutes long. We have the song Gyroscope. What an eclectic sound.
Face to face with it, push down your side. Use all your self-control, worlds will collide.
Interesting phrasing on that sentence too.
Witness the fall from grace. You shed your skin. Change if it pleases you. Just don't give in.
Yeah, it emphasizes every third syllable, which isn't always the way you would say it. Makes some of those syllables sound a little forced.
You're waking up the dead soul. Cradle the excuse, in love with the abuse.
The little buzzing on the outside while this light little sound is here in the middle. Very cool section.
Soul searching breaks you down. You'll never learn. Annihilate yourself. All things must burn. Inside out, you can't go. My gyroscope. Inside out, you can't go. My gyroscope. Inside out, you can't go. My gyroscope. Inside out, you can't go. My gyroscope.
Okay. 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 Neat little track here. Once again, bringing some of the Middle Eastern sounds in here. We do have some extra instrumentation, though. I think this was a sitar off on the right, and we also had some hand drums off on the left. So we still have this palette exploration as we're using more instruments in these songs. And once again, we have a track that feels rather distinct just based off the groups of instruments that are played on it, while still retaining a very grungy core to it all. Pretty straightforward though, beyond this interesting combination of the grunge and the Middle Eastern. But I did enjoy the chorus. I think it was the chorus anyways, where we were jumping back and forth between this more open area that had this light plucked sound in the middle and this buzzing on the outside. And buzzing's really the best word for that. It wasn't distortion. I mean, it was, but it also like crackled. It came in and out. And it felt like this popcorn buzzing on the outside. So that was pretty cool. And then, crashing in once again, which we saw on the first track too, carving out space, allowing the sound to crash in, carving that space out again, doing that same sort of pendulum swinging on this track. And yeah, I really like that moment. The other thing that stands out to me is the vocals that emphasize every third syllable, even if that's not the syllable you would stress in speech. Absolutely. It kills me, man. There's a few sentences in there that just sound so bizarre because that's the wrong syllable to stress. But, it works. Music, singing, I think in particular is really interesting because you can get away with saying things not the way that you would normally speak them. And it comes off as right. It's a very cool phrasing that they have here, even if the syllables themselves sound a bit odd within that rhythmic framework. We did have an interesting beginning to the song, and we wrap it up with that cutting in and out, but only one side is kind of fluctuating. The other one's just droning on this crackling popcorn stuff again. Interesting way to wrap the track up. Let's hit some lyrics on it. And as fairly straightforward as this album has been lyrically, I'm lost on this one. There's a couple of places that are straightforward, kind of presents maybe a key to unlocking this puzzle, but not enough of a key for me to figure it all out. It starts off saying, come face to face with it. Pushed on your side, you'll lose all your self-control. Worlds will collide. Witness the fall from grace, you shed your skin. Change if it pleases you, just don't give in. So there's elements here of clashes with a victor and a loser. Worlds colliding, making changes, compromises, but don't give in, that there's a fall from grace throughout this as well. Those verses are juxtaposed with a chorus that simply says, inside out, you can't cope, my gyroscope. The only thing I can pull out of this at all is a gyroscope helps stabilize something. And right from the beginning, the second line says, when you come face to face, you're pushed on your side, that your world is unstable. Your gyroscope doesn't keep you upright. Maybe that's what the chorus means. You can't cope with my gyroscope. I'm just too good at being me, of standing up for who I am, what I want to do. You can't push me around. Maybe the worlds colliding is the narrator and everything else that they're clashing with. Or maybe a specific person that they're clashing with. And he's saying, you can't keep up with me. I'm too good. I'm too stoic. But I really feel like I'm grasping at straws with that one. The bridge, though, mentions soul searching, that it breaks you down and you never learn, that you have to annihilate yourself, that all things must burn. And that doesn't seem to line up with the message of I'm great because I'm unchanging, because you can't knock me over. If there is this universal truth that all things must burn, the narrator doesn't seem to believe that about themselves. So I don't know. If you got an opinion, a perspective on that, let me know. I'm a bit lost on it. All right, that wraps up the first third then. Heading into the middle third, starting with Alarum. Speaking of where stresses go on syllables, I don't know which one of these gets the stress here. Let's just dive in and see where they take us here. Got that bit of reverb again. Very bright, trebly tones.
I took a slide, slipping down a staircase, a Pyrenean dream. My senses reeled, distorted by the darkness. I lit my way with the screen. And in the rave, an alarm caused a cracked mirror. I got confused by the sound. I turned around, touched it from a distance, and then it fell to the ground.
Super fuzzy right there. Okay. Bit of a bland post-chorus, but I suppose it works. It's interesting how large this guitar is supposed to sound, but how tiny and compressed in the middle it actually ends up being. It is interesting to listen to these fuller chords being strummed across the entire chord when most of the riffs in here are just pick a couple of notes and bounce between them. So to actually have this, multi-octave expansive guitar lick is really nice. Say it's a foot in the grave or a foot in the ground. Either way, it's the second time that sentiment has been brought up. Disgusting sound right there. The reluctance to actually play the note, the first couple of strings feel muted, and then it's just a little whimper that comes out afterwards. Very gritty chord progression right here too. Might be the heaviest track on the album so far, but interestingly, not really for the atmospheric vibes of it. As I mentioned, the instruments themselves don't really come across as large here. They come across as big, but contained. They don't really fill the space. It's not a wall of sound. It's just one really big instrument in the middle of the room. But the chorus, the vocals are more aggressive. The vocals are compressed. I feel like there's more power behind the delivery of them. The guitars are bigger, meatier, fuzzier than ever. And yet, when we hit this moment, it actually feels like the song shrinks just enough, but there's spaciousness where there wasn't before. And I find that to be a really interesting, almost musical oxymoron. How do you make it bigger but take up less space? And that's exactly what's going on here. The guitars also present these really gnarly tones throughout, but they're also paired with grittier and dirtier chords too. There's instability in here, but instability hidden beyond the general compression and production of everything. It's not out in the open. It's kind of tucked underneath. And when you mix that with that da-dun, 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 and that sound right there that wraps this up, it's this heavy, like marchy kind of stuff. It's momentous, it's tempo based, but it's also low ends. And then you pair that with this weak, it's one pitch, but there's actually sounds like there's two guitars here, or maybe it's two strings playing the same pitch, but the first couple of strings in this line, they're muted. You barely even hear them. Sometimes the guitarist is a bit behind the beat. It makes them sound weak, it makes them sound meek, but it also makes them sound embarrassed. as if they're having trouble producing sound at all, and it's quiet, it's a little awkward. I find that to be really interesting with all of that dominant low-end guitar stuff right before it. But generally, this entire section just makes me feel very uneasy, especially paired with the grimy grit of the rest of this track. Like I mentioned earlier, too, I think this is some of the most powerfully delivered vocals as well, just in that they're the most supported. They have the most air support behind them, and they feel the largest and most directed, though I do think it's interesting that production-wise, it pares that back a little bit, doesn't allow it to be as large or impactful as I think it would be without the production on it, which makes it feel purposeful. Why are they doing that? What's the narrative element of this? Why does the song get smaller as it gets bigger? To me, this is the element of the entire track here. It's the grit, the grime, the darkness, the weight, and this size thing. What does that represent metaphorically? Otherwise, this is probably one of their more straightforward grungy tracks. Lots of, actually we do have one interesting element here. Most of this track is straightforward grunginess, but there is this cool moving full chord idea that kicks the song off with a lot of reverb and glitter, and it's just a very glistening idea, and it continues on throughout the track. I don't know what this is supposed to represent either, but it stands out quite a bit. It does use the other side of the harmonic language of this album, though, that being more of a Phrygian idea going on in there, rather than the more rule of cool rock stuff that the rest of the band is playing. So we've heard this sound pretty much on every track, this clashing of harmonic ideas, of atmospheres. But I think it's the production of this instrument that makes it stand out in a way that hasn't in the past, and it almost gives the beginning of this song an ethereal, almost smoky vibe to it before we get into a very physical and real track. Let me hit some lyrics on this one. And again, another track that eludes me a bit lyrically. Talks about slipping down a staircase, senses distorted by darkness, a cracked mirror to the side, fear being fed on by lust, fury of madness, enigmas without reason. It definitely seems to be a song questioning a feeling of being lost and searching for something. But I don't understand what that ends up actually being. At one point, it says, "I found in an act of desperation a subtle rip in the heart. Seduced by the taste of devastation, it tore me apart." So it's supposed to mean that when they actually found what they were looking for, it was too much for them to handle. It does say over and over and over on this track, nothing matters. When it takes me, it rapes me, breaks me, and shakes me down. So it is about having something devastate. But again, it doesn't explain what that is. At one point, it says, "A quick escape from the fear of combination, a vain excuse. I was searching for some answers and I broke away from the scene. After all, animality is an instinct and its luxurious slave. To taste the truth is a seizure of the senses and it's a foot in the grave." So to find the truth is to make yourself one step closer to your own death. and it calls it a seizure of the senses. I wonder if that means to overwhelm or to remove the senses. I looked up what an alarum is, and it's an alarm. It's a sound that alarms. I didn't know that. New word for me, but I mean, just could just use the word alarm. So this is supposed to be a cautionary tale of sorts of the destruction of seeking out a truth that's too much for most people to handle. But it doesn't actually tell you what the truth is, what they were looking for, what they're puzzled by. It just says, I went looking for some stuff. I couldn't handle it. Cool story, guy. Cool story. Maybe I'm just missing something here. I know it's a bit of a comedic jab at the song, but maybe there is something presented here that I just missed. But without that, I don't know. I don't really get the song. I do think that the idea of wading through the darkness, trying to find answers to questions, maybe you don't even know what they are, and finding that you do stumble upon some knowledge and it completely breaks your worldview of things. Yeah, I think the song does a great job of capturing those emotions musically. It is, like I had mentioned, one of the eerier, heavier tracks on the album, and well, it does create a sonic impossibility too, making sounds larger but filling up less space. And well, if you find some universal truth that breaks your understanding of life, I mean, yeah, that also feels paradoxical. So there are some cool parallels going on in here. I want that extra layer. I want that little, just give me more backstory to this. Not a lot, just let me know what you're chasing down is all. This next track is called Release. Oh, we went up. It's a very interesting. There's such a long attack on these that it doesn't work really well to have a faster moving rhythm to it because it feels disruptive. Another really moody track, but I think a lot of this, the strings help, but his vocals, very light, slow, almost airy. Interesting too that tracks, the first 4 tracks, oh actually that doesn't line up, never mind, I thought I saw a pattern, I didn't. I really like this line over here.
It's just to make you see.
kind of country over here. A bit of a positive uplift, but those chimes in the backgrounds. Yeah, that's still super eerie. That doesn't fit anymore. So country. Well, you know, sometimes albums have that one song that's just, it might be fine on its own, but it's not vibing with the album. This is that one. Unless this album's going to take a sharp 90-degree turn here in the back half, that's an interesting inclusion. Wait, what? Huh? What in the world just happened? Okay, let's start with the first 90% of release, and then we'll try to... It's a country song. But it starts out not a country song. And this is what's interesting. It kind of kicks off the same way that Psychopomp did, with being an alternative rock ballad. It's got some grit. The bass comes in strong, just like Psychopomp. Very straightforward, functional drum work. And the vocals are also that lower, moodier, airier vibe down here. Gives it a very specific flair compared to the vocals that we've had throughout the rest of this track, which has kind of been a bit on the nasalier side, very projected, forward placed, very Stone Temple Pilots. And he only breaks this vocal style out for the ballad. So I'm like, okay, store for another ballad. I enjoyed the last one. Let's see what they do with this one. Very straightforward though. We eventually bring in a nice guitar line over here. Kind of matches up with the vocal melody. Do, 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 do. Just this nice rising idea. But instead of holding that note out like the vocals do, this guitar just continues to flourish and build off of it. It takes the vocal melody and expands on what it's doing. I think this is great because it gives us some harmony for those couple of notes that the vocals have. It sounds like they're lining up to do a duet just to harmonize with each other. But instead, this instrument off on the side just kind of goes off and does its own thing, and it builds off of where the guitarist is. I like this, not because it just sounds great, but it's also some thematic elements to it, which I did end up paying attention to the lyrics a bit more than usual because this song is more static than most of the other tracks on this album. Eventually, though, this guitar over here just starts doing its own thing because harmonically we open the song up a little bit. And we go from this moodiness, a little melancholy, to bittersweet. It's positive. It feels more positive. It feels more open. The skies aren't dark and gloomy anymore, but, you know, it's not a sunshine and rainbows either. It definitely has more joyous components while still bringing some of that moodiness in from the beginning. And this country guitar over here playing some bluesy licks for like 2 minutes straight, kind of doing its own thing, certainly leans really hard into that. And from what I picked up on the lyrics, I'm still going to take a break after this and read through all of them. But it pretty much says, you're too good for me. I'm letting you go. This relationship's over. You deserve someone better. And there's, the bittersweetness of that. The positivity of, hoping that their life ends up being better, but also it's the end of a relationship that you seem to care about. So there's negativity in that. I think the song does a good job of bringing all that together, and it started to act as a little bit of a slow burn. We had the first section, we added a layer to that, added a layer to that, opened the harmonic side of things, kind of opened that up a little bit. And I was expecting it to continue to grow, and it just didn't. It stopped there. And I found the song to lose my interest as it plateaued. And then we had a fade out. Not a lot going on here, but I think well done. Great atmosphere. This is definitely an atmospheric band. And for the most part, they've done a good job at saying this is the lyrical themes. How do we explore that in the music? Or possibly vice versa. I don't know their composition process, but regardless, everything's been clicking really well on this album. And then there's a fade out. And then there's like 30 seconds left in the track. And then it wasn't a phone dialing sound, but definitely some sort of touch tone beeping stuff. And then a heavily reverbed and distorted vocal that said 2 or 3 syllables. And I thought they were going to keep talking, but then they didn't. And there was just like 10 seconds of silence. What was any of that? What did it have to do with the rest of this track? I mean, it's obviously a transition idea. The track proper ended with a fade out, but I don't know. That's kind of weird. The next track is called Transmission. It's the title track. Maybe they wanted it to feel like a message being delivered. Mission accomplished, I guess. It's interesting. And this track also, the core part of it, not being very progressive, not being very industrial, kind of being very forward in its messaging and the heavy repetition in the lyrics and music. This is what I meant when I said it doesn't really match the rest of this album. Solid track on its own, I think. It definitely deviates quite a bit from the other 5 songs we've listened, though, including the Ballad, which socketed itself very nicely into the album. This one doesn't. This one brings your attention to it because it's so different from the rest of this. Let me hit some lyrics. Yeah, I pretty much had a solid read off of this. There is a lot more repetition in here than any of the other tracks. And I mean, it says, I'm a man that's weak. I'm a man that's lost. I don't want to hurt you. But if I desert you, it's just to make you see that I want you to be free from me. Very straightforward lyrics. And like I said, very repeated. It almost becomes a mantra by the end of the track. All right, title track, Transmission. Let's hit it. All right, noise. We have more auxiliary percussion. We saw these earlier. I don't remember what track had the hand drums in it and what I thought was a sitar. I don't know what this is though. How very Swan. I knew what that wind instrument was here too. I can't. It sounds like bagpipes, but it's distorted. another one. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. The vocalist really likes writing in that pulse. This sounds so much like a track off of Godsmack's opening album that I find it incredibly... It's such a small probability that they hadn't heard this album, or at least this track before. Whistling? Was that around the last time we had this pre-chorus? I really wanted a halftime section, but I guess the song's got to wrap up here. Bringing it full circle with the intro sampled section, sampled idea tossed into the new context. Yeah, dude. It's so wild listening to earlier music and basically hearing bands that came after them in that music. Like the first time y'all introduced me to Cap'n Jazz, and I'm like, dude, this sounds like so many of my favorite bands. Cap'n Jazz was kind of at the beginning of that whole hardcore emo area. So... This, if you had told me, instead of presenting this as, track 7 of the Tea Party Transmission, if you had told me that this was a long lost, well-produced demo from an early Godsmack album where they tried to be a bit more progressive, I would just buy that. I'd be like, yeah, sure. Because nobody really sounds like Godsmack. They have a very specific combination of a late 90s hard rock sound that uses a lot of Phrygian and Middle Eastern ideas in their music. And also, the vocalist has this very specific and recognizable, to me at least, layering technique that he uses on his vocals. Both of those things I attribute to Godsmack's first two and a little bit of the third album are present here, almost copy and pasted perfectly. And of course, like I mentioned earlier in this album, this predates Godsmack's debut by like 2 or 3 years. The more that song went on, the higher the probability was in my mind that Godsmack, or at least someone on the band, had heard this and said, I want to play that music. There's just, there's no doubt in my mind now. It's really wild. But of course, this is a bit more progressive. If you've listened to Godsmack, they tend to play a bit more middle of the road, straightforward, alternative rock and hard rock. And this isn't that. This has more things going on. So outside of the rockier parts to this, there is all of the different instrumentation. And, you know, also, just now that I'm remembering this part too, the Godsmack parallel pretty much completely forgets that the opening 40 seconds of this track exist. That whole part, well, actually, you know, when I think about something like Voodoo, that also kicks off with some hand drums too, and a bit of a moodier non-rock setup. So, you know, maybe so. Maybe I don't need to exclude that. Anyways, though, coming back to the opening here, we have this really cool beginning of this track. We have some non-rock instrumentation that leads the way. It's still kind of moody, brings in this Phrygian Middle Eastern thing coming in with the harmonies. Once again, the vocals a bit on the lower side, a little bit less projected, a little bit more moodier. Sets up a nice solid foundation that everything's going to be built upon, because this is a really long slow burn. And I say really long at 5 minutes, but for them, it's a pretty long track. Also, it's a long time that they stay on one idea. Most of this album has been more traditional verse, chorus stuff, which they cram into 3 to 4 minute songs. So there's not a lot of room to really hang into an idea for too long. Sticking with this one for as long as they do is, for them, it's a pretty long time to be in one idea. But we eventually add in these, I think it's bagpipes, but run through distortion, and it's a sample, so it gets abruptly cut at the end. It's a short little sample too, but I think that's what it is. I don't know. But we do have an interesting sound there. Then eventually we bring in the guitars, and the drums open up, and we bring in the conventional rock stuff, but we don't get rid of the rest, which is something we've been doing on this album. It's been pretty consistent where if we start off with something more interesting, less rocky, we will replace that with a rock band. We don't really do that here. It continues to sit underneath everything. It is a slow burn. We are building ideas here. I think generally the growth throughout this track works really well. It kept my interest, even as it's one foundational idea. It continues to build and explore. We add new ornamental ideas. The melody on the vocals change up. I think there is a verse-chorus thing here, particularly because there is a moment when he says something like, sending transmission. And then we have this really wild electronic stuff going on, and some spoken word, something, I don't know. And then we enter into a chorus, I think. Regardless, we do that pre-chorus, sending transmission, beep, 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 kind of stuff. We do that twice. So to me, that feels like a pre-chorus, because I'm pretty sure what comes after it's the same both times too. But I think it's interesting that the foundation doesn't really change much on this track. It's what we put on top of it that alters a little bit, which is recontextualizing this foundation. It's what allows us to feel like a slow burn without abandoning the verse, chorus structure that this album has been built upon. And I think it's a really nice middle ground here where there is this cyclicality, forward momentum, and strong elements of pacing, while still presenting a singular sound that grows over time, which isn't the first time we've seen this either. I don't remember which song it was. It might have been Psychopomp, which was the ballad. The rising and falling action that kept rising and falling higher, creating a linear growth across the well-paced elements to it. And we see the same thing here where we can stick with the more cyclical components of going back and forth between two ideas while still building the song over the course of the track. It's a wild song though, and I love its inclusion in the middle. I don't know what it is about, especially in the 90s. I always expect the last track of an album to be more experimental, to try wilder things, to deviate from the norm of the album and just be something a little different. This is the kind of track I would expect to wrap an album up for an alternative rock album of the 90s. And it's not. It's tucked almost right into the middle of this. Very interesting. Yeah, lyrics. I'm a little taken aback about this. A lot of this album has been, I don't know, not so serious. That's not to say that it's been a comedic album. It just hasn't really been very deep and pensive and thoughtful. This track, though, questions what the human condition is. What is our purpose here? It says, tell me what I have when it all slips away, when I see the light fade away. You tell me that what I hold in the palm of my hands. Tell me what I feel because I'm trying to understand. It says, I'm confused by the weight of our virtue. We follow the paths of the slain. In silence we walk through these shadows, embracing the pleasures of pain. Once again, the transmission, I think I hear it. It doesn't really say much, but it wants to be profound in a way that I don't think the other tracks do. The stakes are lower and less philosophical. I really like that line though, we follow the paths of the slain. That so much of what is presented as our options before us it's made by those who came prior. What does it mean to walk these paths? To find the treasures and the pain that are along these journeys? Well, like I mentioned, it's not super deep, but it's quite a bit different than the lyrics of the rest of the album. I don't know if I necessarily find that same synergistic quality on this track, but I do enjoy the more adventurous lyrical direction on this one. Most of the tracks on this album, I've been enjoying them musically. Lyrically, they've been fine. This one, though, I think stands out a little bit, simply because it tried something a little different. All right, this next track is called Babylon. This is going to wrap up the middle third of this album. Let's dive in. So synth and platter hard drive,
Now that the thrill of the massacre's over, isn't it sweet?
And an electronic drum beat.
On your veins, I've waited so long.
And a noisy guitar. It's not an eclectic group of sounds, but it's different.
So long.
That just sounds like an alarm now.
I roll back the stone just to see what
That's
I'm
big.
missing. Glimpses of grandeur now faced with defeat. I've waited so long. I've waited so long. I've waited. I've waited. So.
Interesting vocal crack there. Okay. We created a smaller sound. I figured we would have filled that back in and built the song back. So is this like, is it Alarum or Release? Or the song ended early, then there was something that happened at the end. Is Babylon over? None of this bears back to the first half. Well, that's the thing too. It's not even, it's half of the song. Or half of the track. This is an interesting choice here. Well, you know, I'm going to pause it there. Simply because the sound did roll over into this new track, but it faded. It was just the fade out that rolled over. It didn't build into the next idea. Babylon. The first half, at least, is a really solid recontextualization. We have a short verse and then a long chorus. Maybe about equal. We have a verse and a chorus. The chorus builds into a bigger second verse, which helps build into a bigger third verse, or the second chorus. And it's the same idea of cyclical linear movement, of recontextualizing an idea that you've heard with new layers, new ideas, new instrumentation, new chord progressions. And in this case, also new vocal work as he shifted from that lower, airier stuff into his higher, more nasally sounds. And I thought that was a really great way of delivering the energy that the instruments were bringing in those second and third time through these moments that wasn't present in the first time through these sections. But otherwise, I don't know that there was much about the first half that's worth talking about. It's still that type of composition that they've been doing a few times. I did enjoy the eclectic combinations of timbres, though, and I pointed those out as the track started. Little electronic, a little bit of rock, a little bit of, it was an acoustic guitar, but an electronic, like a dancey drum beat. So, very interesting combination of tones there, and it ended up, we also had like some noise going on too. I don't know, it was cool, but lay that down and build it up, and it was like 2 minutes long. It honestly wasn't that big of a section of the track itself. The back half of Babylon is a very slow, though evocative piano solo with a meep 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 meep, rising and falling Muppet electronic sounds on the outsides. And I mean, I don't know. I have no understanding. It connects absolutely zero to the first half. I can kind of see this through line of transmission coming into the. Oh, you know what? The other track that did that was Release, because I had mentioned that it sounded like touchtone dials before the track Transmission, as if maybe that was supposed to lead into it. Which makes me wonder what the first half of Babylon's supposed to be about if the second half ties into this idea of transmission. Because this rising and falling electronic pattern kind of sounds like sci-fi bleeps and bloops for sending messages across space. I can kind of see that maybe, but there is a dark element to it also. A danger to this. But I think pairing that with the acoustic piano sounds nice. I love that contrast. And the piano solo was well done. A bit on the minimal side, but emotionally evocative, tying into a sort of restlessness against the darker electronic rising and falling pattern. But as I stated, I don't know how to tie all this together. I got thread hanging from like 4 different things here. Like, none of this, you can't connect these pins in any way. Not any way that makes sense anyways. My corkboard is just a series of red pieces of strings falling from pins. There's nothing connected there. Oh man. And we had a crossover track too. Again, the idea itself at the end of Babylon doesn't move into track 9. It eventually ends at what sounds to me pretty close to silence, but the fade out doesn't end at the end of track 8. It bleeds over into the beginning of track 9. I don't know. Let me look up some lyrics to Babylon, and then we'll push forward into the final third. And this is a song about playing the long game, losing the battle to win the war, maybe. The first line says, "Now that the thrill of the massacre is over." Second line says, "I roll back the stone to see what I'm missing." third line says, now that your kingdom of Babylon's fading, where will you turn when you can't find your soul? And it ends with salvation's at hand. It's a matter of taste, lost in ideals that you found in the trash. So it seems to be saying, yeah, you won. You found the massacre to be thrilling, so you enjoyed the battle itself, and now you're the victor. But what happens when the victory isn't what defines you and your kingdom anymore? It says that your kingdom is fading. Where's your soul? Was it worth doing all of that in the past to still wind up here, saying that your ideals were things that you found in the trash? They were worthless to other people, and yet it's what you based your identity around. Now, what makes me think that this is about the long game is that the chorus simply states, I've waited so long, over and over and over and over again. You actually hear it 16 times in this track. Waited so long for things to get to this point. Yeah, you may have won all those years ago, but decades later, was it worth it? It's an interesting track, I suppose. Especially when the literal part of the song that these lyrics come from is incredibly short. We're talking about a 2-minute song here. And granted, there's not a lot of depth to these lyrics, but I think it's funny that a song about waiting so long is the shortest song on the track by far. Of course, we are disregarding that the back half of this song, or of this track, it's a totally different song. So I'm not including that in the runtime. All right, so where does this album take us now? It's interesting that Transmission and Babylon both went for a bit of a, I don't know if I'd say a deeper take, but something a bit more serious. We've had a couple of songs about relationships, and actually more than a few by now. It's interesting that these two talk about time and worth and purpose. Where does this lead us? We have Pulse, Emerald, and Aftermath to wrap this album up. Every track on this album, oh no, Army Ants breaks the pattern. I was gonna say every single track is just one word long, except Army Ants. All right, let's dive into Pulse, see what's going on here. Yeah, dude, this is groovy. It's kind of stonerish.
I saw a face in the mirror. It made my blood run clear. I think I've waited too long. I went along for the ride. She complicated the slide. I went to take her hand. I couldn't feel her pulse.
Syncopated rhythm. We got like a trippy psychedelic reverb.
Senseless is pleasure. Nothing's forever. That's what you see. You can't deny me.
That was an interesting section because this
I had a dream that within.
has really short choruses, which I think that's what that was.
You do a dance with denial. Yeah. She see the beautiful land. I went to take her hand. I couldn't.
I do like that a bit of violin in the background of the verses. Not a really strong pre-chorus. It should be building up into this moment, and it sort of just is. Although I find this chorus kind of awkward too. 4 bars of this legato, and then 4 bars of this shouty bit. It almost feels like it's slowing down on those reversed tom hits, bass hits, I don't know. I don't know, I feel like this was a fine song. As eclectic and experimental as they can be, this is kind of safe within the sound they've developed on this album. I'm just going to keep it rolling. I don't have anything of interest to add to that. It was a track. Definitely a track that fits on this album. I think the best part about it was the sludgy, groovy verse. But the chorus didn't work, the pre-chorus didn't work, the bridge was... and that took us to an outro that was fine.
Confess what you crave, alive without pain. You'd kill
That thin, almost pathetic, bounced snare hit in the background.
still remains. Still, they don't know who you are.
Ooh.
Still, never know who you are.
Yeah. Unexpected lack of resolution.
I'll be waiting for you. Do exactly what you're told. I'll be waiting for you. Ashamed by the threats. You pierce the embrace, afraid and alone in a dark, lonely place. And still, they don't know who you are. They'll still never know who you are. Just be still, my emerald. I'll be waiting for you. Do
I'm getting strong anathema vibes from both the choruses and this bridge. How the atmosphere opens and gets very positive, and then the vocal melody comes in and brings in this bit of darkness. Also, texture layering the vocals with bells and the violin is a really nice technique there. I don't think we've had three-way texture layering before. So I really like that. What? We were wrapping things up, but okay. Okay, we just did. It's cool. It's cool. Like I had mentioned previously, Pulse is a Tea Party track. It feels like one. Doesn't really do anything interesting or unique. It feels like the most, if you were going to make a band, you're like, I'm so inspired by the Tea Party, I want to make their kind of music. That's the kind of music you would make. It's a very safe style within their general palette that they work within. That's not to say it's a bad song. I think it's fine. It doesn't have anything unique to it like most of the other tracks on this album do. Now, Emerald is our third ballad on this album, and it's also the one that I think, I don't know if I'd say I enjoy it the most, but I think it does the most with the format. And I think that's what I really like about it. The rising and falling pattern throughout it, the subtle use of electronic ideas. The drum beat in here feels to me closer to electronic drum beats than rock drum beats, despite the fact that I think compositionally it kind of fits in both. A lot of it comes down to the production of it, and I think it's really interesting to hear an album where the drums, they shift way more than they should, than drums typically do. Like vocalists, right? They can change their sound. They can do harshes, they can do nasally, they can do like wide vibrato stuff. But like your guitars, you can have effect pedals and stuff. But drums, man, drums are drums, right? Unless you're doing MIDI triggers, your drums are the drums. And so I find it really wild that each track on this album tends to have a different vibe for the drums. And like they're just playing rock stuff. But it doesn't always feel like they're a rock drummer. It doesn't always feel like they're playing acoustic drum kit. I think that's really cool. And here we kind of have what sounds to me a little bit more on the electronic side of things. So, I mean, we kind of have this light beat in the background. And there's a general darkness to all of this. A little bit of a somber element from all of the instruments, but it's also a bit smaller. We're not looking at big production through most of this, and it's what I think really works well on this track, because as we push into the chorus, we have this eruption. The sky opens up, and I guess is kind of similar to Release in this perspective. It kind of opens up the sound a little bit. We have bells and violins that come in to accompany the vocals, and there's this general feeling of a more positive push, but the vocals come in with the melody and immediately they bring in some of that melancholic element to it. And it just puts a little bit of this this darker presence on what felt like it was going to be an uplifting moment. And I think that works really well. They do a great job at creating these bittersweet moments like this, and it's been in a few tracks up to this point, but this might be the one that I think is the most well done, primarily because they give the chorus like a two bars, maybe bar and a half before the vocals come in, so you get to feel the dark clouds start to push away, and you feel all this like openness, and the weight of the verse kind of lifts, and you're like, oh, this is nice. And then the vocals come in, and it's like the third note or something, and they're already introducing some of that darkness back into it. And you're like, oh dude, it's kind of like a false positive right there. And I think that works really well. It's a cool way of introducing this bittersweet element. And even there at the end of the track, the third time we go into a chorus, it still caught me off guard. We have the harmonic shift on the instruments. I'm like, oh, they're taking this in a positive direction. And then the vocals come in. I'm like, oh yeah, dude, how did I forget? This is what they've been doing all song. So yeah, I really like that whole concept they've got building there. I do find the bridge to be a little awkward. It's very texture based. It's very electronic style. It's this ping ponging sounds, and much like the pre-chorus, it just kind of doesn't work for me. I don't know. I'm going to assume that maybe if you listen to more electronic music or texture based music, maybe this is a cool thing, having all these different sounds, having this synth tone break up the rockier moments of the verse and the chorus. It never sells me. It feels more disruptive than anything else. And this isn't the only track to do it, but I do think that this, maybe just because of recency bias, but it's one of the worst examples of it so far. And I think it is just because it pops up so often. It's our pre-chorus, which means we hear it 2 times right off the bat, but then we also spend a whole bridge on it that takes us back to a chorus. And it never adds anything to the track, at least not for me, not from my perspective. It just kind of is there and doesn't build up to things very well. Let me hit some lyrics. I believe this is supposed to be a romantic song. Let's just start from that angle. We'll explore it from there. It says, confess what you crave, a life without pain. You'd kill for the taste, but the hurt still remains. So this other person, this you, wants a life that's, well, pain-free, but maybe that's just an exaggeration for the purpose of conveying how much they maybe have been in pain their life. It says the hurt still remains. It says that, did you always want to be? Did they try to steal your soul? Did they hurt you with deceit? Can you come in from the cold? So you've been out here in pain, traveling this world yourself, and it's been a rough journey, is what I get from these sections. The pre-chorus says, and they still don't know who you are, and they'll never know who you are. So not just a life of pain, but also of insignificance. And this is where the chorus kicks in. It says, just be still and I'll be waiting for you. How does that make sense? But I think the idea here is something along the lines of diamond in the rough. You've had a tough life. You're a gem, but it's kind of hard to find you. But just stay put, and we'll connect. We will come together. But there's this one line in the chorus. It says, just be still, my emerald. I'll be waiting for you. Do exactly what you're told. I'll be waiting for you. And that do exactly what you're told sounds really wild. I wonder if it's supposed to be something along the lines of just bide your time, go through the motions, do what needs to be done until we can meet, until our paths can cross. It's just when the rest of the track is you've been abused and lied to and people have taken advantage of you and you just want a life without pain, doing what you're told, I don't know. It feels a little disrespectful. It's not very understanding of the other person's plight. I mean, it's one line, right? So I don't want to extrapolate a lot from it, but that one line, I mean, we hear the chorus 4 times, and every time I read it, I was like, I don't know, man, that one line's just really wild. But also, be still, I'm waiting for you. If I'm waiting and you're waiting and neither of us are making advances, how's this going to work out? I don't know. It's that's an interesting one. I guess I forgot to do Pulse, so we'll do that one next. Luckily, this isn't a concept album. We can look at these lyrics out of order. Okay, I'm kind of glad I did Emerald first because I had a read on that. I don't know what's going on with this one. The chorus says, senseless is pleasure, nothing's forever, the sooner you see you can't deny me. Now I don't know what senseless is pleasure is supposed to mean. Senselessness is pleasure, maybe. That would be the right grammar, but senseless is pleasure doesn't mean anything to me. Nothing's forever makes sense though. And it says, when you accept this, then you can't deny me. Can't deny my existence. Can't deny my perspective. I don't really know. But it definitely alludes to the idea that our narrator knows something that someone else doesn't and wants them to see this truth because it would validate themselves. But then there's the verses. I saw a face in the mirror that made my blood run clear. I think I've waited too long. I went along for the ride. She complicated the slide. I went to take her hand. I couldn't find a pulse. So he didn't recognize himself in the mirror, or maybe blood run clear could mean that he recognized himself as something that frightened him. Maybe he saw his parents' face, his dad's face in the mirror. Maybe it was just the simple concept of age. You look in the mirror one day and you just think, dang, dude, I'm looking old. Where'd these gray hairs come from? The wrinkles, the skin spots. I don't remember any of that. Wasn't here yesterday when I looked in the mirror. Some days you're a bit more attentive, you know? It says, I think I've waited too long. Okay, there's something he wants to do and he realizes he's running out of time. I can follow it up to this point. It says, I went along for the ride. She complicated the slide. I went to take her hand and I couldn't feel a pulse. The best read I have out of this is that he didn't make his move when he was younger, and when he finally went to ask this person out or whatever, they were dead. Figuratively, metaphorically, literally, I don't know. But they were dead, and there was no chance for this relationship to work. The other verse says, I had a dream that within a celebration of sin, we do a dance with denial. I only wanted a friend to see the beautiful end. I went to take her hand and I couldn't feel a pulse. I don't know. With the concept of time here, I think that's my best read on it, is that he missed his opportunity to do something with this person. I kind of took it in a romantic relationship direction, but it does say that he only wanted a friend to see the beautiful end. And to me, that reads as a romanticized version of death. And I don't know what else the beautiful end would be. I don't know. This whole thing, it's perplexing. There's way too many vague elements to it, and the metaphors, at least from what I'm reading, don't flow very well. I'm a bit lost with all of it. So, I guess we're just going to move into the aftermath here, which is the final track. Emerald isn't really a big bombastic high point to wrap an album up on, so I'm going to assume Aftermath is going to be our peak here. Otherwise, it might be kind of awkward, and Pulse was our high point. Emerald's the wrap up, and Aftermath, well, by definition, is just what comes after. Usually, though, albums don't peak that far from the finale. But let's dive in, see what they're doing. We have these sci-fi transmission waves again. There's just a lot of sci-fi stuff. Blips, bloops, trills, warbles. You name it, we got them.
Desperate to take, lost in its wake, time slips.
Also, it's wild. I haven't really brought Stone Temple Pilots up much. They've really shifted their sound from those opening couple of tracks. Even right here, I'm thinking Nine Inch Nails. It's reminding me a bit of Downward Spiral. Dark, dreary, ominous, industrial. It's true of most music, but buy-in is really important. And I'm not buying into this, and it's just coming off as kind of... I hesitate to use the word, but kind of cringy. Over-forced. I have a hard time emotionally connecting with this, and it's just kind of coming off as parody to me. I don't think it's supposed to be. I'm also not a fan of those snare buildups. I don't like the production and tone of the snare drum, and it just being these eighth note hits over and over. In fact, most of this song just kind of being drums with this particular production, not selling me on it either. I do like how this synth tone has taken the vocal melody, stripped it down to its basic components, just the key notes, and ran with that for a little bit. Nice passing of the baton. I don't know what it's supposed to mean, but I'm always gonna congratulate good composition. Oh, it's coming back. And it left again. Yeah. I don't have many thoughts about this one. I like the main melody enough, but it doesn't have enough. To me, I feel passion or emotional connectivity between the vocal delivery and the words themselves. It just feels phoned in. And that never quite clicks. The lack of instrumentation never quite works for me. The drums, I don't enjoy the way they sound. I think technically this is fine. The melody's strong. There is a drum beat. It doesn't waver. It's pretty consistent. While I subjectively don't like the use of the the snares as a drum fill idea, just that ga 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 ga. It's geez, no. I'm not a big fan of that subjectively, but objectively, it is a drum fill. It fills time. It creates a differing idea at the end of a phrase so that we can break up some of the monotonous elements, bring something fresh in, and then start over again. It works. Everything in here is functional. I think putting these very low, dreary sounds against the, I don't know, very thin electronic tones in here, it creates an atmosphere. I don't know what it means. I can't connect with it. I don't get anything out of this, but that doesn't mean that it's not there. That doesn't mean that there's no intentionality or purpose to this. And, you know, as usual, when I come across moments like this, I extend the microphone out. Let me know what you get out of this. If you find this to be emotionally evocative or investing, or if you saw or heard a narrative to this, you know, let me know. Put that stuff down into the comment section. But I don't connect to this at all. It doesn't sound well done. It doesn't sound meaningful or purposeful. I don't get an emotional connection to it. I don't feel like the vocalists are connected to this, so I'm not getting that performative element to it. It's missing a lot of stuff to really make me, in a sense, I suppose, take it seriously. It does sound comedic, almost as if you're trying to make fun of this type of low fidelity, low energy, minimalistic writing. And I don't think it's done for parody or satire, but that's what it feels like to me. It's missing the heart to it all. And the thing is, too, is that we've had more minimal tracks on here. We've had sections with lighter, less energetic vocals. I'm sold on those. I really feel like the music tells a story, that the vocalist is, you know, emotionally invested and singing in a way that they're connected to what they're saying. And I don't get that here. And it has nothing to do with this style of lower energy, minimal style, minimal writing. It's just this particular song doesn't strike me as something that's feels pronounced in any way. It's just kind of here, which it is the aftermath. That's one of the defining elements of an aftermath, is it's what's left. Its meaning is usually completely derived from what was before, the contrast. This is very contrasty. Absolutely. This feels like the ending of something. Well, I suppose the ending has already happened, which does line up well with Pulse being our climax, Emerald being the finale, and Aftermath being post-finale. But I think that brings up another question too, is why have a post-finale? It's like a post-credits little teaser thing. It's not really there to accompany the art in a film. It's there to help promote what comes next, to hopefully get you engaged for the future. I don't see the purpose to that here, and it feels anticlimactic to have an ending and then show me what happens after the ending. The ending is where the resolution's at. Now, I do think this is pretty cool, and I'm not saying that this can't be used effectively. After all, many novels and films have epilogues of sorts where the film is over and they give you a little bit of extra, this is what they did after they saved the day kind of thing. I'm usually not a big fan of these, but I understand that they can be effective. And actually, I have a big theory on why I don't think epilogues work for me, but it's outside the scope of music and outside the scope of this, and it's kind of lengthy too. So maybe I'll make a little post in the Discord or something about that. But yeah, I had this weird revelation about stuff like this a couple weeks ago. But anyways, to me, the story's over. And this song doesn't really feel like it adds on to anything. It feels like it's just here after the fact, which again, might be exactly what they're going for. But as a way of wrapping up this album, I really feel like Emerald was the way to end it. I'm curious if anybody else feels that way though. Let me hit some lyrics for this one. Maybe that can help grant me some context to this. And then I suppose we're done with this video. Now, as is fairly consistent with the end of this album, it's a bit of a deeper look at things particularly pertaining to life and time and nearing the end. It says, desperate to take, we're lost in its wake, time slips away too soon. The second verse says, life in these veins, godless and stained, glimpses of hope exist, slanted advance, threatened by chance, time slips away too soon. I wonder if this isn't supposed to be personal, saying that I still have life in my body, and I may not have made the best choices in my past, but I still have hope ahead of me as long as I still take breath. It says, but unfortunately, it's all a die roll. Just threatened by chance and time slips away too soon. It's so easy to lose time, to lose health, to inexplicably make a bad die roll and, you know, just have your life ended prematurely. Again, another introspective song. But then we have the chorus, which is just 3 lines repeated once per chorus. So we hear this 3-line stanza 4 times. Waste what we want. We beg and we're bought. And nothing is wrong with us. And I'm really curious what he means by this. I mean, waste what we want pretty much implies that we can do and will do whatever we want. If we want to waste something, we can do that. And maybe even speaking about time in general, as prevalent as it shows up in the verse, maybe that's what he's talking about. If we want to waste our time, we can and we will. But he says, we beg and we're bought. And I wonder, too, if this is supposed to be about life and personality. We beg. Are we talking about people who generally don't have a lot of power in their life? Power or money? Or are we talking once again about the end of life when we beg for more time, whether for ourselves or for someone else? Part of the bargaining aspect of grief. But he says, and we are bought. And I'm curious about this because the idea of being bought for me implies that someone has purchased your thoughts or your opinions or something along those lines. And, you know, if you're begging, yeah, you can be bought. You have a price. But also in the element of time, is this supposed to say that your soul has been purchased? It has a time that it's going. You don't have a say in that. But then it says, and nothing is wrong with us. And what? I don't think I get this chorus. And maybe if I did, it would help me understand the rest of the track. Maybe. But as it stands, nah, dude, I get the gist of it from the verses. The chorus goes right over my head though, and I don't really think that this is a strong lyrical end either, although admittedly Emerald wasn't either. This is definitely a much better ending for the album than Emerald was. But I do think it paints an interesting picture where the lyricist or lyricists are very focused on their age, the time that they've spent and the time they have left. This is one of 4 tracks, which presents over a third of the songs on this album, focusing on not having enough time left to do the things you want or to spend time with the people who you want or wish you had spent time with. It's an album about regret for the most part. It's not a super consistent album, and there's just as many again sort of flippant tracks in here, which are just about, you know, track 1. Oh, track 1 was about temptation. I just do whatever I want, poor impulse control. By the end of the album, he's saying that I wish I had more time to do things more meaningful. Now, I don't think that's completely accurate. Gyroscope, Psychopomp, Army Ants, yeah, Army Ants kind of ties in with that I'll do what I want attitude from Temptation. Psychopomp, Gyroscope, Alarum, I don't think these particularly present a strong thesis for this album is about someone who was reckless in their youth and regretful in their old age. I don't necessarily think it is a concept album, but I do find that as the album goes on, somebody was in charge of writing lyrics and they were really focused on their age and time. So I find that to be interesting that the album does start with more abrasive, reckless songs, and it shifts not necessarily fluidly from there, but the end of the album is certainly less focused on those themes entirely. And I suppose that's going to wrap this up then. These are my thoughts on the Tea Party's Transmission. Let me know what you thought of this, if there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on. There were quite a few tracks where I was a bit lost on, particularly the lyrics, but I could also have had a bad read on the music too. Let me know. Put your thoughts, opinions, perspectives, interpretations, all that stuff into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of these. All 3 of those? All 3 of those. I'll be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. UTC. I did it. It's been like 4 weeks straight where I've forgotten to use the live stream times when I plug tomorrow's video. We're doing a live stream tomorrow. Usually lasts for about 2 hours, but we're going to have a short playlist for tomorrow. Usually we check out 12 songs. I think we only have 7 or 8. So I might open it up. Public requests. We'll see what happens. But yeah, about 2 hours. You just hang out, chill, check out some music. It's really laid back. It's a great time. And it's hilarious, dude. I end up laughing so much every stream. Geez, it's so good. If you can make it, I highly suggest that you do. Otherwise, Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As usual, we'll continue on with, not continue on, we'll start next week's theme. Why won't this one hair go away? Next week is the week that contains Halloween. So we have Spooky Week. I'm excited. Spooky Week's always great. It's different from Sinister tones at the beginning of this month, as Spooky can be lighthearted, family-friendly, and just eerie rather than ominous and aggressive like Sinister tends to be. I always like Spooky Week. All right. I guess that one wraps us up then. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.